Well, hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's Carol Baskin, and I'm here with Howard Baskin.
Hi.
And you guys have talked with Howard before. I call him Howie. You guys have talked with him before over on Clubhouse, but we wanted some of our friends over here on Twitter Spaces to get to hear about him. I get all of the credit for all of the amazing things that we do, and it's just not me. It's mostly Howie that does all of the stuff about the litigation and the lobbying and the Big Cat Public Safety Act and all of that. And there was recently a program that came out called Joe versus Carol, where Kate McKinnon played me and Kyle McLaughlin played Howard. And did you want to talk any about that before you start, or you want to do that at the end?
Let's do it at the end.
Okay, well, what would you like to talk about first?
Well, what we're going to do is get an update on the Big Cat Public Safety Act.
Sounds good.
So I'm assuming some people on this call may not be familiar with it, so we'll do a kind of quick review of what is the problem that it addresses and how it does it, and then we'll talk about where we are in Congress and what's involved to finish up and pass it. So the bill basically addresses two problems. One is the cub petting. It's just a miserable life for the cubs. They're torn from the mothers at birth. They're deprived of sleep, deprived of food, and we have no idea how many of them die in the process. And then when they become too big to pet, they either become breeders, which is a miserable life, or they end up in backyards or possibly destroyed or slaughtered for their parts. So the cub petting is the first part that the bill addresses, and the second part is what we call private owners, which are people who do not have a USDA exhibitor's license. And this is where you hear about these tigers in backyards, in basements, in Harlem apartments, places like that. And that's not just a miserable life for the animals, but also a threat to first responders who have to deal with it when they escape. In Texas alone, there were something like 7 tiger escapes in the last year. So the bill does two very simple things. One is it stops the cub petting and the photo ops. And it does that by requiring that if the cat is outside of its cage, then you have to keep the cat 15 feet from people. Well, that means if you're 15 feet away, you're not going to be able to pet the cat or take a picture with it. That will remove 90% of the incentive to breed, because most of the breeding is to keep pumping out cubs so these places have a supply of cubs to pet. The second part of it is it phases out these private owners. And the way it does that is it grandfathers in the current cats, because we're not going to go around confiscating them. We couldn't possibly house all of them. But those owners cannot breed or acquire any more, and they have to register their current cats once with the Fish and Wildlife Service so that the service has a baseline to know whether they violate the law and breed any or add any. So that's what the bill does. Now let's move to where we are in Congress. Right now we have 255 co-sponsors in the House. That is more than we've had ever before in any prior session. And really importantly, we have 51 Republicans, which is considerably more than we've ever had before. So, the bill is very bipartisan. We're still working to add co-sponsors, but as you can imagine, we've kind of already got the low-hanging fruit, if you will. The ones that are easiest to get are already on the bill. So each one that we add now is much more difficult to do, but we're continuing to pound away at it. And one of the ways we're doing that is that one of the silver linings, I call it, of Tiger King is that Carol has become viewed as a celebrity. And we've known for years that legislators like meeting with celebrities. We've always thought of that as people like DiCaprio or Harrison Ford. But what we're finding, kind of to our surprise, is that Carol's being viewed that way. So legislators and their staff are interested in meeting with her. So when we send out an email through our lobbyist asking for appointments, normally if you're not from their state, they don't want to talk to you. And now we find that they do want to talk to Carol. So not only can she get appointments, but normally when you go to Washington to go to an office, you only get to talk to the staff. And now what we're seeing is in many cases, the legislators themselves want to meet Carol and get a selfie. So we're taking advantage of that. That's a huge asset. So Carol has made 3 trips to D.C. in the last few months, one in early December, one in mid-January, and she was up there last week. And each one of these trips is 3 to 4 days. Each time she's had about 30 appointments. So imagine running back and forth between these buildings to fit in 30 appointments in those 3 days. I mean, it's just a crazy schedule. And about half of those are with the legislators. So, for instance, our most recent Republican co-sponsor, and that's where the focus has to be, is Representative Palazzo, who's a Republican from Mississippi. Well, he just signed on recently, and he was one of her visits in one of her appointments in one of her prior visits. So it is working. It's just a slow process. And even if they don't co-sponsor, what we hope is if we get the bill to the floor, that this kind of paves the way for them to vote for the bill, having had some contact with Carol. So now, in terms of getting a bill through the House, there's really 2 ways. The normal process is called regular order, and that's where it goes to a committee. It only gets heard in the committee if the committee chairperson decides that they're going to hear the bill, and then you have a hearing and testimony, and then sometime later they schedule what's called a markup, and then they have to have a vote whether to, quote, report it out, and then it goes to leadership, which in the House currently would be Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, and they decide what bills go to the floor. Another person that is critical to that process is what's called the ranking member. That's the most senior member on the committee of the minority partner. And what you end up with is what they call a funnel, because you have many, many bills trying to get to committee. Only a tiny percentage actually get to the committee and out of the committee. So, but you still have many more coming out of the committee than there's room to vote on the floor. And so the challenge is getting to be one of those. Now, there's an alternate process that is not going through the committee process. In the House, it's called suspension. And there, it's used mostly for very non-controversial bills like naming post offices. And they limit the debate to 20 minutes, but it requires a 2/3 vote instead of just a majority. Now, the benefit of getting there is, in addition to speed, because you don't have to go through this long committee process, is that there are more floor slots for suspension votes than there are for regular order votes because of that limitation on only 20 minutes of debate on each side, so they can fit more in. If you think about it, these representatives are in session for a few weeks doing this voting, and then they're back in their district for a few weeks. So the amount of time that they're there doing these votes is pretty limited. So they may have time for 2 or 3 regular order votes in a week, and those tend to all get used up by major bills. But they may have time for 10 or 15 suspension slots in a given week. So even then, there are still a lot more bills looking to go on suspension than there are slots. And again, leadership decides which ones go. So in December 2020, leadership decided that our bill would go to the floor. Now, that's last session. It was at the end of the session, and we passed by that 2/3 vote with about 10 votes extra. So where we are right now is having more co-sponsors and a more bipartisan bill than ever before, and we are, through our lobbyists, pressing, and through the sponsors of the bill, pressing leadership to try to make our bill one of the ones that they send to the floor on suspension in the next month or 2, because if we can be done with the House, then we can focus all of our attention and all of our lobbyist attention on the Senate. So now let's move over to the Senate. In the Senate, we have 39 co-sponsors out of the 100 senators, 4 of whom are Republicans, which again is more than we've ever had before. But the Senate works a little bit differently. You still have regular order going through committee, but the House tends to pass individual bills, and a lot of them, whereas the Senate has less floor time. What I'm told is the Senate the word they use to describe the Senate is that they work more deliberately. They tend to work slower, give more thought to things, and part of the reason for that, or a major reason for that, is that they're not under that 2-year election cycle time frame. They have 6-year terms, so they can take their time. The other thing is a lot of their time is used up by other duties that the House doesn't have, like approving judges or the upcoming, for instance, Supreme Court judge nomination. So in the Senate, they rarely pass bills just alone, unless they're very, very major bills. So there are 3 paths for us in the Senate. One is that the committees in the Senate tend to create packages of bills, group bills together. So for instance, the Energy Committee will put together 5 energy bills that all have to be bipartisan in order for them to be part of the package, and send them all through at once. Another way that bills get through the Senate is by being attached to some major legislation. So when I learned this recently, I went back and I looked through the last 12 years at what animal laws or animal bills had passed and become law. And what I found was that a number of them had been attached either to the Farm Bill, which kind of makes sense because it's animal related, but the Farm Bill, we only have a Farm Bill every 5 years. And in some cases, if there was money being allocated, they were attached to the Appropriations Bill, which we have every year. The third way to get through the Senate is the Senate's version of suspension, but it's different. It's called a hotline or unanimous consent. And the reason it's different from suspension is it's not a 2/3 vote. It has to be what its name says, unanimous. Well, that means that any one senator who says no kills it. So the way they do the process is if the leadership agrees to send it to hotline, then there's a group of staffers who basically send messages out to all the offices and ask, does anybody oppose this? And if nobody opposes, then the bill will pass. In 2003, our Captive Wildlife Safety Act, which prohibits selling big cats across state lines as pets, passed that way. In fact, it passed unanimously in the House under suspension, and then by unanimous consent in the Senate. So it does happen, but what's happened in recent years is that there are 3 or 4 senators who tend just not to like hotlines. And so their tendency is to object to a hotline. And there's also one possible package that's being formed in the committee. Our committee is the EPW committee, that's Environment and Public Works, that we might be able to be a part of. So that's another possibility. The bottom line of where we are right now with the bill is we are far ahead of where we've ever been before in any session at the 14-month point in the session. And so we have an enormously greater chance of getting the bill passed this session than we've ever had before. But we are really at a critical time because the clock is ticking. And toward the end of the year, when it's an election year, Congress tends to get wrapped up in the election and not that much gets done. So it's really critical that we get it through the House in the next couple months in suspension so that we can focus on the Senate and either be part of a package or try the hotline. And so what that means is we really need the grassroots calls now, people calling their legislators and asking them to co-sponsor, which, as many of you know, we make very easy to do at bigcatact.com. That's bigcatact.com. It's a very simple process that takes 2 minutes, and even if you've called before, I would encourage you to call again. So that's the update on the bill. And before we go to anything else, why don't we see if anybody has any questions?
Actually, I have something I want you to talk about. So this last trip, you worked with Shelby Babowski from the Texas Humane Texas Humane Legal Network.
Legislative Network, yes.
Yeah, so can you talk about why you did that and what the benefit was of her bringing letters from kids, that maybe people can round up some kids to write some letters?
Sure. Shelby is fantastic. We met her probably 6 years ago when we were asked to be a speaker at her organization's convention in Texas. And she's been very supportive of the bill and trying to call on the local offices. Most of what that organization does is state law. And I don't think she'd ever been to D.C. to lobby, but she's lobbied at the state level a lot. So we invited her to come on this, particularly hoping to set up some Texas office visits. And we were able to set up visits and kind of using Carol again as the hook to encourage, make it more likely that the offices would visit. And she, of course, has a knowledge base from what's going on in Texas is very helpful. And anytime you can bring a constituent from, and particularly one who represents a group of people from the state, that's helpful. So she went on the visit. She really studied up, did her homework. She was very articulate. For instance, we've tracked 3 escapes of tigers in Texas because they were in the public, they were in the news. What I didn't know until this visit was she knew about 4 more that never made the news, so she was able to talk about those. Now, going way back to when we were chasing Joe Exotic's traveling show, and we would try to organize little protests in front of the malls he was at, one of the things we learned is that if there were children involved, the media loved that, and we got more media attention. And we also know that in the case of one important senator, that senator co-sponsored another bill because children in the state wrote to her about that bill. So Shelby brought with her letters from children to deliver to these Texas legislators. And why don't you say what reaction that got?
Well, I was really surprised because she whips out these folders, and of course she had all of the same boring stuff that we always say about all of these things. And then she pulls out maybe 2 or 3 letters from children with pictures drawn, and these were probably grade school age children. And their eyes just lit up, and they started talking about their own kids, and then it got into this whole discussion about wanting to save tigers for their children to see in the wild in the future. And so it's a great way, if you know a kid, if you don't know a kid, pay a kid to write you a letter, because send them to me. If you don't know where to send them, I'll be sure those get delivered, because it really did make a difference.
Right. So we ended up getting appointments with both Texas senators, the staff for Senator Cornyn, and actually, somewhat to our surprise, when we sent the invitation out, Senator Cruz said he wanted to meet with Carol himself. It's one step at a time. It takes persistence and just flogging away at it, but that has really paid off. And again, we're further along than we have ever been. Very, very few bills get through in any year, and ours really, I would say, we at least have a 50-50 chance, and there are very, very few bills, and I don't think any other animal-related bill that I'm aware of that has as good a chance of passing this session.
Yeah, what was really nice about going into Senator Mike Lee's office was right on the heels of Howie having talked to them just a day or 2 before, then it really warms them up when I go into the office and they have it fresh in their minds. So that's why we send out the alerts right before I go to D.C. asking all of you to contact your member of Congress. And I can't tell you, like every office, they're telling me how many people that they're hearing from about the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And so that makes it important to them because they realize their own constituents care about this. So thank you, everybody who did that. I'm going to hand it off to you, Deb, when you're through clapping there, and if you want to pass around the questions, if you have any to start with, and then start down the line.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you for all the hard work that you have put forth in this effort, not just this year, but all the years past, and just how appreciative those of us sitting at home are, for you, Carol, especially, going to DC and walking those halls, and I can't imagine how your feet must hurt after the end of the day, but just know that we are all very appreciative of all the work that you guys have done.
Oh, thank you.
Karen, questions? I know you've got them.
I was laughing before I even put the speaker on. Yeah, you know what? I'm a little confused because it's not that I don't understand everything you said, Howie. I tried so hard, even when you've emailed me before, and I've tried to picture this whole thing in my mind. And I go back to when I was at the State House when Nosey's Law passed. It was rep after rep just coming up and voting, or a yay or nay, how they do it. But is it that same thing? Is it like this one moment in time when this bill goes before these people and there they are and they're all saying yes or no to this? Is it like they're all together like it is in the States? Or is it this like abstract thing where is it over time? Is it just this one moment?
It's one moment. So what happens is, and what happened in December of 2020 is it goes to the floor on suspension. So the bill comes up. Now they can do a voice vote or do what you're describing where they have to go one by one. They would do a voice vote unless someone requests that it be, I'm not sure what they call it, but an announced vote. And at the time, we had one representative in 2020, Representative Bishop, who's thankfully no longer in Congress, who was opposed to the bill, so he wanted to make it difficult. So he insisted that it be a roll call, they call it, a roll call vote. And so we have the video from that night. It was at night, and where one by one they step up and they show on the screen the yays, how many yays and nays there are, and how many, and you're sitting there tensely waiting to get to 2/3 to know that it passed. So
it's like 400 and some odd people that they have to go through, right?
Yes, there's a total of 435. They don't necessarily all show up, so you might have 20 or 25. I think we had that didn't show up that night to vote. But so that is what happens. Now, this hotline in the Senate, I think what happens is they send out these messages, emails, whatever, to all the offices saying, does anybody object? And if nobody comes back and objects, I think it just becomes law. But I'm not sure if there's an interim step on the floor. I'll have to ask about that.
It passes. It doesn't become law until the president signs it into law,
well,
which is
right.
another hurdle.
Right, it passes. But, the president won't be a hurdle. If it passes both houses, he will certainly sign it.
Right.
But, so I'm not 100% sure what happens after they send out those messages. I think somebody just concludes, the leadership just concludes that if nobody objected, that it passes.
I don't know how long they give them. Like, do you get a day? Do you get a week? How long do you get? I don't know.
I will have to ask about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, Carol, because, everyone's going to be waiting, like, chomping on their nails, waiting, and then it gets to a certain point, and then does it just stop, and then we have to wait for all these other people, or is it like we can sleep that night, like that kind of thing. So that's why I asked that. And then didn't you say one time to me that you can kind of piggyback one on the other, but that's not going to happen with this, right? It's not going to go to the House and the Senate at the same time?
I don't think I said that.
Okay. Maybe I'm sorry. See, I don't want to put words. This is why I don't understand. But okay, so it can't do that, right? Go to the House and Senate at the same time?
No, it does each of them separately. It can be simultaneous. It could be in the House and the Senate on the same day, but I think that's probably very unusual. It would be coincidence. It's a separate process, but they go through the process simultaneously. It's been introduced in the House. So
Okay.
we're working that process. It's been introduced in the Senate. You don't wait. There's no waiting for one to do something necessarily. Now, there could be decisions in the committee. The committee staff have a lot of influence. So, for instance, you could have the committee staff in the Senate say, you know what, we think we could have an easier time if it's already passed the House. So let's hold off a bit and see if that happens. That's not the case right now, but that could be the case.
And when you talk about piggybacking, you're talking about like with the RAWA package.
Yeah, when I refer to piggybacking, it's piggybacking on a bigger bill. So,
Okay, gotcha.
or they call it attaching. So,
Okay.
and the big bills, you know, they're going through. You know, they have to pass an appropriations bill. They have to pass a farm bill. So, you know, that one is what they call moving. It's going to go. So, if you can find a way to tack your bill on as an
Right.
amendment to that, then you kind of ride its coattails.
Okay, that makes sense. I get that. Okay, last one, promise. How much of an alert or warning do you get that it's going to be put out there? Like, will they tell you, or one day you're just going to wake up and it's going to be like, oh my gosh, it's today? Like,
It's not a surprise, but there's
Okay.
not necessarily much notice. So in December 2020, the vote was on December 3rd, and what happens is leader in that case the leader was McCarthy, and he has a calendar because in that case it was the Republican House, and so he has a calendar where he publishes what's going to go to the floor the following week or 2 weeks out, but I don't think much more than that. So I think we got like 2 weeks notice, and then we're scurrying to reinforce all of the votes that we have, calling all the offices.
right. That's what I'm wondering about. Okay, well, thank you. I love you guys. You're the best ever, my heroes, and thank you for answering my question. I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, Howie. I don't understand. I'm just learning, so I probably make my head with that one. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Hi, Colleen. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Yeah. Hi. My name's actually Colleen. That's just the silly way it's displayed. But I'm an animal advocate. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I've never done one of these things. I'm sorry, guys. I'm an animal advocate here in Tucson, Arizona, and I've done a few campaigns against the city and against the state for like farm legislation and trying to get elephants to sanctuary, that kind of thing. And the things the opposition has done has just blown my mind. I saw a similar thing happen out here where they made their logos look like ours, and they sent out mailers to make it look like the opposition was saying something different than they were, like they were us. So I'm curious, with this legislation, what kind of craziness have you guys had to deal with coming from the end of the opposition, people who don't like animal advocates?
Well, you have me smiling because we certainly have run into that. So the one opponent of the bill that is Doc Antle, this fellow who has a big cub petting operation in Myrtle Beach. And the good news, just as an aside, is when we started with the bill back in 2012, we went around looking for who was doing cub petting, and we found 56 cub petters at the time. All right, we're now down to about 5, and Doc Antle is probably 80% of the cub petting, and in particular, all of the other big ones, one by one, particularly the quote stars of Tiger King, have fallen from the sky. So Joe, of course, was in jail. Jeff Lowe, his successor, has now had all of his animals taken away. Tim Stark, who was one of the ones in Tiger King, has had all of his animals taken away. Skulak was bought out and his animals dispersed. So we're down to very few. But Antle has money, and he has a lobbyist, and his lobbyist is very unscrupulous. And so he's running around the halls of Congress, and he's a lobbyist who has been there for quite a while. And personally, when these lobbyists are there senior, they get to know the staff, they get to know some of the legislators. Now, of course, we have lobbyists who similarly are and are really better known, but sometimes it just takes a relationship with just one legislator who's in a position of power to create a problem for you. Tell these people lies. He tells them this creates overlap between Fish and Wildlife Service and the USDA, and that the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to come inspect all the zoos, so he scares the zoos. None of these things are true.
Hi, Dawn. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Hello, guys. Of course. I guess it's just a comment. Basically, you're not sure when it will come to where we get to watch it on TV.
Correct.
You're not sure of that, like not knowing when it's going to come to the TV, and we're all going to be biting our nails and making it pass, right?
Correct. We'll know when Steny Hoyer announces it on his calendar that it's going to the floor, and that will, as I said, probably be only a week or two before it goes to the floor. But we'll be putting that on Facebook, and you will become aware of it. We'll be publicizing it.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I am rooting for this all the way, and it's going to pass this year. It's going to pass. Howard and Carol and Deb, everybody, thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Don.
Hi, Paula. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Howard and Carol. It's great to hear you. Great to see you, actually. I'm back up here in the cold north in the snow now. I learn every time I hear you talk about the Big Cat Public Safety Act, I learn more. But I think the thing that I worry or can't get my arms around is this hotline business, because it seems like such a struggle to get senators to come on board. And the thought that every single one of them, I mean, if there's one objection, it won't pass. I mean, it seems like a long shot to get it through that process, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Well, the good news is we don't have to get them to say yes. We only have to get them not to say no. So inaction is on our side. And as I said, the captive wildlife...
That's not true very often.
Right. The captive wildlife safety bill passed that way. And if the ranking member of the committee doesn't oppose it, and the leadership, the minority leadership doesn't oppose it, then, in other words, if nobody's calling around saying, hey, oppose this, then we have a shot. I can't tell you it's a 90% shot, but it's not a Hail Mary pass. It's a possibility.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Thank you.
And let me suggest, should we take a minute and talk about Joe versus Carol so that we don't run out of time?
Go right ahead.
So, Peacock, Thursday, released their 8-episode series of Joe versus Carol, with Kate McKinnon playing Carol and Kyle MacLachlan playing me, and what's his name playing Joe? He's not a
something.
Who cares? We only care who played us. So anyway, now this was a whole different experience. We've sort of gotten used to seeing ourselves on the screen after working on what's probably 6 documentaries at this point. But to have famous actors, very accomplished actors, playing us on the screen was a whole different surreal experience. And in some ways difficult, because I think they made an effort. We've listened to some interviews, and Kate McKinnon listened to Carol's entire diary to get to know Carol. They didn't contact us, and they didn't explain why not. I can think of some reasons, but they really made an effort. And what they wanted to do, when they're asked, well, why did we have to do this again? Why rehash it? They said, well, what we wanted to do was really explore these characters. So, unlike Tiger King, they did more trying to accurately portray people. It was difficult because when they do this, in order to fit everything in, they condense things, they change time frames, they make up stuff that isn't really what happened, but they do it with the idea of making the point that what happened. Now, there's some places where they really got it wrong. For instance, and this was an important one that it was unfortunate, they present in this, and I don't want to be a spoiler and tell you too much about it, but they present in it that after I negotiated the mediation after a 12-hour day with Joe, where we reached agreement, they presented it that Carol then cratered the agreement, which is what Joe claims. That's not true. What happened is Joe and Jeff Lowe cratered the agreement. So there were things like that were kind of 180 degrees wrong. But if you stand back and look at it, they did, I think, a very good job of conveying Carol's passion for this advocacy and the struggles she's had both personally and with the bill and with Tiger King and all of that. I think they did a very good job of conveying our supportive relationship with each other, which they talked about in most of the interviews and in a very respectful and favorable way. There was a scene where they had me, it was kind of not an argument, but a raised voice kind of discussion where Kyle MacLachlan is complaining to Kate McKinnon that you don't think about how I'm feeling. Well, that's totally
You've never said that.
No, it's totally wrong, because Carol is almost oversensitive to how I'm feeling and not wanting to burden me, and so, but that it's relatively minor, because when you stand back, the overwhelming impression and the thing ends. I won't tell you how it ends, but it ends in a very positive way in that regard. So there was that. It also made a strong case for the Big Cat Public Safety Act, why it's needed and what it is. And I thought Brittany Pete from PETA made a great comment. She said it's an 8-episode advertisement for the bill. So, of course, we were thrilled with that. We were thrilled that they used all CGI animals, the tigers, the camel, as opposed to any real ones. So that was wonderful. And it at least portrayed some of the negative side of Joe, instead of what Tiger King did, portraying him as this sympathetic victim. So I think that was helpful. Of course, it earned them a bunch of nasty comments from all of the Joe supporters who believe what they saw in Tiger King. But we were glad to see that. So overall, we were really happy with it, and kind of honored that these two actors and actress would play us. It really kind of a thrill, and I'm hoping someday to meet with one. We can take questions either on the bill or on Joe versus Carol. Back to you, Deb.
Daniel, you're next, so I'll let you decide what you want to talk about, and then we'll go ahead and go through the rest of the speakers up here, and then if anybody else does have another question, we'll go back and pick you up at that point.
Well, hello, Howard and Carol. It's nice to hear you both in the same room.
Thank you.
Yes. I have a question and then I guess a comment. Let's say that the Big Cat Public Safety Act passes and the president signs it into law. Does the law come into effect immediately after he signs it, or is there like a grace period?
I think the Fish and Wildlife Service, I think the no cub petting would take effect immediately, but when it comes to the private owners having to report their animals, the Fish and Wildlife Service would have to set up some process for that, some regulations. So we would have to wait for that. And honestly, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if there's something like a 180-day gap in the language of the bill that says it takes effect so and so. So you've kind of caught me, but I will check.
Okay.
We know where to find you, Daniel.
And the only other thing I wanted to say as a comment, I know that Ash Wednesday was special for a lot of people this year because of the rescue of Coda, and I wanted to thank you all for bringing her to Big Cat Rescue. And from what I've been seeing on Explore, it seems she likes Florida a lot and is enjoying herself.
You know, that was Howie's first rescue. He's been doing this work to save cats for 20 some odd years, and it was his first time to get to go out on a rescue.
Well, and it was very interesting to me. You know, I had not been on one. I've heard the stories of what we encounter, but everyone is different. You never know what you're going to encounter. There's certain things we can't talk about on this one because it's a law enforcement issue. But I can tell you, we got there, and the cages were probably 400 yards into this property, and the only road, and I loosely use the term road, to get to it was a winding, unpaved, and when I say unpaved, it was sand. It wasn't hardpack. So you could get a regular vehicle back there, not alone wheel one of our 1,200-pound transport cages back there. So it was actually logistically very challenging to even get to the point where we could get the cat into the transport cage. And then, you never know how it's going to go with the darting, the anesthesia. If the cat gets very excited and consciously kind of fights the anesthesia, then it takes longer, or in this case, we actually had to dart it a second time to get it to get to sleep. So I hadn't seen that firsthand before. So it was a very fascinating process. But she seems to be in good shape. This is not an animal who shows signs of being mistreated. If anything, she's probably a little overweight. And it wasn't by any means the worst enclosure that we've ever seen. It seemed to be reasonably sturdy. One of the first things you do is kind of go around and pulling on stuff to see if there's a risk of the cat bashing through it. And it did have some covered area where the cat could get shelter. It wasn't one of the horrible places that we've been.
Thank you very much, and I'll give it back to Deb so she can pass it on.
Hi, Mary. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Yes. Good. Hello. About the bill, I'm curious, do you have any part in selecting which bill to attach the Public Safety Act to?
Yes, if there's an opportunity, of course, we would work with our lobbyists and with the main sponsor, Representative Quigley in the House. It would be kind of a group decision, but yes, we would have input to that.
And do you know of any bills coming up that you're looking at this point?
In the House, there's one, but it's kind of remote, and it's more of a package situation than attaching it to it, whether a couple of other bills might be joined together with that one. In the Senate, it's more formally a package. I think in the House, the main bill may have already passed, so the mechanics of getting it to become a package, I think, are a little different. Whereas in the Senate, it's in committee, and I think they had a hearing, and so the issue there would be whether they decide to put together a package. But right now, there's no major bill like the appropriations bill or the farm bill that is an obvious choice to simply attach to.
And there's kind of a double-edged sword there, because anything that the other party is trying to push through probably has things in it that you don't want to become law. So we had this come up in the last session where they wanted to attach it to a plan that was going to result in killing more wildcats in the wild. And it was like, well, no, we don't want to be a part of that. So it's really
That's
tough.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy. The other thing is,
we just had a really nice thing happen, though, here in Florida, and are sending that to both of them. The sheriff in Lakeland area in Polk County is Sheriff Grady Judd, and he is nationally known, incredibly capable, runs one of the most efficient operations, lowest crime rate, with fewer officers per capita. A week or so ago, I spent a fascinating day, truly fascinating. I mean, he was a really incredible guy. He was just voted Sheriff of the Year by the Major County Sheriff's Association, the association of the bigger counties in the country. And it was a fascinating day, very personally interesting. I left him a little bit of paperwork to not overburden him, and thought, well, I tried. And lo and behold, I get back from this rescue Monday night and get up Tuesday morning, and there's, from his assistant, is his letter of endorsement of the bill. So I've had our lobbyists send that to both of our senators, hoping maybe that gets their attention.
well, let's hope so. I think Grady Judge is amazing. We have friends that live in Lakeland, and I follow him also. He's something else. Yes, I watched the entire show, Joe versus Carol. I'm sorry they treated you like kind of Looney Tunes, Carol. You're not.
What makes you think she's not?
I think she's a very savvy woman, and I think, honestly, she's one of the most forward-thinking women I've ever seen.
Well, thank you.
I admire her so much. She thinks so far out of the box.
I agree with you. I'm just teasing, of course.
Well, of course you are. That's your job.
I'm not stupid enough to be serious and say it.
No, you have to live with her. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, CJ. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Yes. Hey, Howie.
Hi there.
Hey, Carol.
Hello.
I have, you may not know the exact answer to this, but maybe you can give me some insight. Whenever we get a new co-sponsor in either the House or the Senate, I've been putting out a post in the Facebook groups. And in the Senate, Congress.gov shows that we have 45 co-sponsors, and it has not been updated since January 5th. But if I heard you correctly, I think you said 51 now. And I just wondered if you have any clue. I mean, I know there's a little delay, at least of maybe a week or so. But like I said, it hasn't been updated since January. It's still showing 45, and I'm dying to put out another update.
Are you talking about the Senate or the House?
Senate.
Okay.
The House is up to date. It has the same number you said. It's the House. I mean, the Senate.
Well,
Sorry.
the House is the 51.
51 Republicans. He keeps
Republicans.
saying it without saying whether it's a Republican, so it's confusing.
Oh, okay.
Of the
co-sponsors-
250.
Yeah, the total I think is 255. Okay, I misunderstood. Okay, I thought you said there were 51 Republican senators. I was going to say, we're still stuck at 45 from what I've seen.
No, it's 45 sounds right, of which 4 are Republicans.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. And I was really pleased with Joe versus Carol. I did think that they showed Carol to be less kind of, I kind of agree with like just kind of more ditzy than at least she appears to us. I didn't say fun-loving, I said ditzy. And the only thing that actually really bothered me, and I don't think this is a spoiler because anybody that saw Tiger King knows that he killed 5 tigers, but the way that they presented that was made him look more sympathetic instead of the fact that he had done it for greed.
Right.
And that I thought was like way wrong. That upset me more than anything else in the program. But overall, I was very happy because you're right, the focus was where it needed to be. There was a lot of talk about the bill. So anybody that didn't learn anything about it from Tiger King would at least know from this. So thank you.
Agree with you totally. Thanks.
Thank you, CJ.
Hi, Nancy. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Yes, hi Howard. I want to ask, were you able to have any conversations with anyone from Alabama?
Well, we actually have had the good fortune of having Representative Marshall, who's known as a conservative, on the bill, and I think you had one other.
I met with Tuberville.
Oh, did you? Not this
Last
visit.
time, or time before.
Last visit she met with Senator Tuberville, the coach.
I went to the Alabama convention that they were having there and did photos with everybody who was there from Alabama.
You know what? The list is on my desk. Would you mind going in there and grabbing it? We're just pausing here while Carol, I had the list on my desk, I believe. Do you see it?
Well, the list of...
Your visits, your appointments.
Okay. Was Lemus from Alabama?
Yeah, Jerry Carl is a representative from Alabama. She met with his staff. And that was the only other one. Who is your representative? Do you know?
Terry Sewell, but she's Democrat, so I think she's on board with it. So she's written before that she's in support of it. I was thinking in particular about Senator Tuberville. I was hoping he might be an advocate. I still keep calling. I try to call their office personally, sometimes just to talk with the staff. One of them was very, very nice to me. I don't know if there's anybody else there who may be swinging in a different direction, but we just got to keep trying.
Well, and those calls right now are critical, and if you have anyone else that you can interest in calling, that would be fantastic. This would be the perfect time for it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't go by sir, I go by young man.
I can't say that, but thank you, Howard.
Hi, Zoe. Did you have a question or comment for Howie?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. This is something that I'm just curious about, and I want to ask you guys because you're together right now. I know you guys are always saying how you're super respectful of each other and you guys never argue and you never raise your voices at each other. And I'm just wondering how you manage to do that despite having such a high stress life and having so many responsibilities together.
Well, I think we probably have the benefit of that tending to be our nature to start with. But we also have the benefit of having talked about that before we got married. And I kind of initiated that conversation and said to Carol that, when it came to writing our vows, I said, I would like to, I think our vows should be like the United States Constitution. Now, most women would have looked at me and it's like, what the hell are you talking about? And I knew that's what she was thinking, but instead, she was okay. Well, let's see what he's talking about. And she said, all right, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you think about it, the Constitution is a set of rules about how we are going to treat each other in this country. And I would like to know what's important to you, both how you would like to be treated and what are the things that are important not to do. And I'd like you to be aware and see if we can avoid those kinds of things. And I said, look, I watch these couples, and I think it's rare. I know some people who can say nasty things and it really is like water off a duck's back. But for me, when someone says something nasty to me, it's like inserting a knife, and you can apologize. That's like pulling the knife out, but it leaves a scar. And I said, I think that you can make a metaphor that's often made of love to like a campfire. And you can either over time throw bits of water on it until it goes out, or you can keep feeding it fuel and it grows. And when you see an 80-year-old couple walking down the street holding hands, well, those are the ones that have thrown wood on the fire instead of water. And I said, so look, if I understand that you may have moods, it can be due to stress. Neither of us are typically emotional or roller coaster type people, but I can get stressed and be at the computer and be interrupted, and without realizing it, turn and be curt and say, what do you want? And you let's try to avoid that. And if you're feeling moody, whether it's hormonal or due to stress or whatever, I just have no problem with you saying, hey, I need to be alone right now, and I'll leave you alone. And let's try just not to do that and deal with it that way. There are times when one of us at the end of the day will apologize, feeling that maybe we slipped a little bit, and it's rare, but when it is, most of those times
the other one didn't even know it happened.
Yeah, the other one didn't even realize. I know if I call her, I can tell in her voice if there's some medical issue going on or she's really occupied. But instead of it, it's often a matter of tone. I can say, look, I'm really busy right now. I need to call you back. Or I can say, look, I'm really busy right now. Leave me alone. And there's a huge difference just between those two things. And we've really managed to honor that in an almost remarkable way.
One of the things that I find has been the most helpful is like your cat at the door. As long as the door's open, the cat is perfectly happy. But the minute you shut the door, it doesn't matter which side of the door the cat's on, the cat wants to be on the other side of the door. And so with us, we had made this arrangement that if one of us felt like we were too stressed to talk about something at that moment, that we could ask for more time and say, look, I can't talk about this now, but I'll talk about it tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, whenever I feel like I can deal with this. And I can't think of a single time that we've ever actually used that strategy, but we agreed to that strategy, which has always given me the freedom to feel perfectly comfortable with that door shut.
So does that help?
Yeah, that does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe.
Well, thank you guys all for joining us tonight. It's been so much great information from Howie and Carol. Carol or Howie, either one, did you have anything lastly that you wanted to say before we close the room?
Nope, not for me.
No, I think we're good.
I just have one quick question. It's Karen. I know it's Karen. I know it's overtime, but I just, not even a question, but I did notice something about Joe versus Carol, and beforehand on the interviews with Kate, I watched all the interviews, and she really, really seemed to love Carol so much. And I just wondered, she almost seemed to want to reach out to you, Carol. But I feel like she put a little bit of her own personality into the character that she, I'm calling it a character because it wasn't quite you. But did you feel that way too? Did you think she put me, like, she put you in there, of course, because she read your diary and she learned about you, but she put a little of herself in there, and
I would love to meet her. I did see some of the interviews, and I thought it was really sweet the way that both she and Kyle MacLachlan talked about how they approached the roles and that they wanted to be true to who we are. I think a lot of the things that she did, she probably did because it's hard to convey it. So, like, one of the things I thought was so funny is everybody knows how I walk, and she walked like she was like marching into fire or something, just this really strong, headstrong, leaning into it kind of a walk. But I think what she was trying to get across is that Carol's a driven person, and you wouldn't know that from the way I walk. So she's using a meme of her body to try and convey that, there's a lot of passion there. So I think a lot of the things that she did were meant to try and get across a certain feel that may not actually remind anybody of me, but overall from, 30,000 feet it might.
Yes, exactly.
And now,
I just wanted to see if you picked that up.
Well, and now I find, like this morning, I went to the bathroom, I look in the mirror, and I'm expecting to see Kyle MacLachlan. and it's not happening. I mean, it would be a major, major improvement, but it's not happening.
No, you're way more handsome than him. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much.
That's what I told him.
Yes, absolutely.
The voices are uncanny between you guys.
Yeah, and what we've heard, or Carol had read, is that many actors and actresses are very self-focused and difficult people to be around, and he has a reputation for being just this really nice person to everyone, and I thought that was particularly appropriate because I try to be that way.
Overall, I'm just happy they portrayed you as wonderful people. That came across. So, to me, after seeing Tiger King and then seeing this, in 2 years, what a beautiful step forward people have taken, regarding you two. So, that was amazing, and I respect both of them for that. So thank you for answering that question, though. I just wanted to see if Carol saw that. She was, having a little bit of Kate in there and a little bit of Carol in there. So thank you so much for answering that.
Thank you, Karen.
Well, I did a TikTok, my only TikTok, where I impersonated Carol impersonating Kate. So if you go to Carol's TikTok, I don't have my own TikTok, so it's on Carol's TikTok page or whatever you call it. You'll see it like 15 down now, where you can see my effort to do that and be funny.
We will be watching that over dinner tonight. Thank you, Harry.
Howie, you need to do a TikTok of you kissing your guns.
I will say that I've noticed on social media since Joe versus Carol came out that there have been many more supportive and kind comments than I have seen in over a long period of time. So I do think that it has had its desired effect, at least for the most part.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah, I've been very pleased with the comments, and I've been, of course, replying back. So, but I have been real pleased with that. And it started Thursday when it came out. So I think it's directly related to that.
Great.
Next week, our guest that we have invited, we don't have a for sure answer back yet, so I'm not going to share with you who that is unless Carol has heard something since we've last spoken.
I have not.
So just plan to stay tuned. and as we know for sure who it's going to be, I will be sure that I publish that so that everyone knows who we anticipate being with us next Saturday evening. So you guys have a great week, and thank you all for joining tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. Thanks. Bye. Good night.
Montreal's. Oh, the sweet cow.